All right, let's jump right in. We are going way back in time to witness a pretty intense, high stakes showdown. You've got the prophet Isaiah on one side, and on the other, the entire ruling class of Jerusalem, a nation that is deep in crisis. And this is not some polite debate, you know? This is a head on confrontation, and the fate of an entire kingdom is hanging in the balance.
And Isaiah, well, he does not pull any punches. He kicks things off with this fiery accusation. Can you just imagine the tension in that room? He calls out the most powerful men in the entire nation, calls them scornful. He's clearly not there to make friends. He's there to deliver a message he believes is a matter of life and death.
So this is the central mystery we're going to unpack today. The leaders, they have a plan. They've got a strategy they think will guarantee their survival, but Isaiah, he gives it this absolutely terrifying name, a covenant with death. How on earth can a plan for national security be a deal with the grave? Well, that's exactly what we're about to find out. Okay, so first things first, let's get to know the key players on one side of this fight, the leaders of Jerusalem. These are the guys in charge, the ones making all the big decisions. And, according to Isaiah, they are the absolute root of the problem. Isaiah's case against them starts with a charge of just, well, total incompetence and corruption. He says they are so lost in their own indulgence. He says they've erred through wine, that their ability to lead, to see anything clearly, to make any kind of sound judgment, it's just completely gone. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Look at how the leaders respond. They don't just ignore Isaiah, they actively mock him. They accuse him of teaching baby talk, basically dismissing his divine message as way too simplistic for them. They even mimic his words. And in the original Hebrew, their mockery, this savlasav kavlakov, it literally sounds like a toddler babbling. Isaiah's comeback, though, is absolutely chilling. He basically says, "Oh, you think my words sound like gibberish? Fine. If you won't listen to the clear teaching of God, then get ready to learn from the strange tongue of the invading Assyrian army." Their mockery is about to have very real and very, very dangerous consequences. So what was this secret plan the rulers were so confident about? This brings us to the thing Isaiah called their covenant with death. So it turns out this so-called covenant with death was a secret political alliance. And who did they make this deal with? Assyria. Yeah, you heard that right. The brutal, aggressive empire that was the single greatest threat to their existence. They actually thought they could make a deal with the predator at their own front door. Their whole logic was that this secret treaty, this refuge of lies, as Isaiah calls it, would be like some kind of magic shield. They believed that when the Assyrian army, which Isaiah vividly calls the overflowing scourge, came sweeping through the land, their little secret deal would mean they'd be passed over, kept safe. They really thought they were the smartest guys in the room. But see, Isaiah wasn't just there to tear down their plan. He was there to offer a radically different path to security. And it wasn't some secret deal. It was a public foundation for everyone to see. And this just lays out the two opposing worldviews perfectly, doesn't it? You've got man's plan, a secret, deceptive alliance with a dangerous enemy. And then you have God's plan, open, steadfast faith in a sure foundation, what Isaiah calls a precious cornerstone. It's a choice between human scheming and divine trust, a conflict that is as old as time itself. This right here is the alternative. Instead of all that panicked deal-making, Isaiah offers this promise of a sure foundation. And you gotta catch that last line, "He that believeth shall not make haste." In other words, those who trust in this real foundation, they won't be rushed or panicked into making dumb decisions. They can be patient, trusting that the promise will hold strong. And you know, this idea had incredible staying power. We're talking centuries later, New Testament writers like Peter and Paul picked up this exact cornerstone imagery and applied it directly to the Messiah. It just shows how absolutely foundational this ancient prophecy became for understanding what true security really looks like. So what happens when you choose the refuge of lies over the sure foundation? Well, Isaiah uses a couple of unforgettable metaphors to describe the inevitable and frankly kind of embarrassing failure of the leader's plan. First up, the direct consequence. Isaiah lays it out plainly. Their clever little treaty will be totally worthless. It's going to be annulled. And in a painful, ironic twist, they will be trampled down by Assyria, the very power they thought was going to protect them. Their whole plan is going to backfire spectacularly. And here's the imagery that just makes it so vivid. Isaiah compares their man-made security to a bed that's too short to stretch out on and a blanket that's too narrow to wrap yourself in.
I mean, it is a perfect, almost painfully relatable picture of something that promises comfort and security, but in the end, just miserably fails to deliver, leaving you cold, exposed, and frustrated.
But the story takes another turn here, and it's a shocking one. God is going to act, but definitely not in the way anyone expected. Isaiah calls this God's strange work. And why strange? Well, because for centuries, the Israelites expected God's judgment to fall on their enemies, the Philistines, the Canaanites. But now, in a shocking reversal, that judgment was aimed squarely at them, his own people. To them, this was absolutely unthinkable. And this whole theme of reversal builds up to one final, stunning prophecy that basically turns the entire world order upside down. And this is the verse at the heart of it all. It's this powerful, poetic image of a complete and total transformation. But what does it actually mean for a forest to become a field and a field to become a forest? This single question has been debated by scholars for centuries. And that's really the question for us, isn't it? This isn't just some simple statement. It's a really dense metaphor. And figuring it out is the key to unlocking the final piece of Isaiah's message. So, how do we piece this together? Well, interpretations usually fall into two main camps. One view says this is a huge prophecy about a massive shift in salvation history. Lebanon, which represents the non-Jewish world, will become the fertile field of God's people. Meanwhile, Israel, the original fertile field, will be treated like an outsider. The other view sees it as something more immediate. Lebanon is a symbol for the powerful Assyrian Empire, which will be weakened, while the fertile field of Israel will grow strong like a forest. It's a choice between a long-term spiritual reversal and a short-term political one. So in the end, Isaiah's entire message really boils down to this one fundamental choice. Do you build your life, your security, on the shifting sands of political power and secret deals, the covenant with death, or do you build it on the precious cornerstone of faith? The question he put to those leaders all those years ago, well, it still echoes today. Which foundation actually proves to be the sure one?